And some people will say that he didn't make this promise to do this burnt offering. It was called. He said, "I vow this vow to do this burnt offering." Right? Whoever comes out to meet me after the war, if you let me win. He won. She came out, and he said these words. I'm going to here. Let's see exactly what he says. He says, "And it came to pass, and she came home, and the father who did, and she returned unto her father, who did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed." And notice how he says, he did with her, meaning this vow, whatever it was, which he only made one vow, right, to do a burnt offering, was done to his daughter. He says it right there. He who did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed. Okay? And then she goes into the, into the hills for 2 months with her friends to hang out and have fun and blah, blah, blah. And then they start, every year they lament this, this death. Because she's considered a hero. She sacrificed her own life just so that they can win the war and be safe. So she is a hero. Of course, they're going to mourn her sacrifice every year. I mean, wouldn't you mourn and celebrate that how someone would sacrifice their life to save the society or to save the village or save the country or whatever? Yeah, that's why they do that every year. And so the question I have to ask is this: this is back in the day. Apparently, this talking to God in person was a commonplace for this guy Jephthah, right? All the people in the Bible, they all seem to be talking to God directly, right? So, if your faith is based on being against human sacrifice, and you have the proof that God exists because you're talking to him all the time, right? Why would you ever do that? I could see if there was, they were saying, well, we never talk to God, so we don't, whatever. No. These people are saying they're talking to God on almost a daily basis. I mean, I'm over-exaggerating, but, and yet, so they obviously believe what he's saying, right? Why, he would never, no one would do, what person would do that? I mean, if God came down and started doing magic tricks and showed you all this whatever, took you to other planets and, took you back in the past and, snap of a finger and you're like, oh, well, I guess you are God. Are you going to do something that he doesn't like? With all that proof, you're going to start being like, well, I'm going to human sacrifice people. No, you would never do that. That makes no sense. 0 cents. 0 cents. Okay? You would never do that. Okay? The reason, and why doesn't this woman, the daughter, why doesn't she react? How does she react? Does she react like, oh, well, that's a sin to human sacrifice someone? Or does she act like, oh, this is commonplace? We're Christians, and that's what we do, or we're Jewish, or whatever, the Bible. The Bible says that, that's what we're for human sacrifice. You know what I mean? Why, if they were against that, why didn't anyone bring it up? Like, wouldn't you have brought it up? If you came out of your house and met your father, and your religion specifically said no human sacrifice, and then he says, well, I'm going to have to human sacrifice you, wouldn't you at least say one sentence like, hey, I thought we were against that? You wouldn't say, oh, you're right, you should have to do that. You should definitely do it. If you don't do it, you're going to be a bad person, Dad. You got to human sacrifice me. You have to. This makes no sense. No sense. But let's see what the Christians say, because they're all going to want to have their explain this away. I'd like to know how they're going to explain it away. We'll see here in a second. My question to you, okay, if you're a Christian, even if you're not a Christian, all right, I want you to imagine yourself being a Christian. You're sitting on your couch, right, and you got this war going on. Right, that your God does not condone human sacrifice, right? You, the viewer, watching this video. Knowing that, would you ever, and especially if you talk to God so you know He exists for sure, 100%, would you ever, knowing that God hates human sacrifice, would you ever say to God, hey, if you let me win this war, I'll human sacrifice somebody? You would never do that, would you? You, the viewer, I'm asking you. If the answer is no, I would never do that. That's crazy. Why would I make a deal like that when I know He doesn't like human sacrifice? Then you have to admit that this story is bogus, man. This is a king's version. Okay, a king is an entitled dictator, all right? So you can believe the entitled dictator who picked the books in the Bible, right? King James. You can. Moses wrote the first five books, and he was a king. You can say he wasn't a king by name, but he got his job as leader by his bloodline, and his kid got it. Just Abraham's kids were leaders up to Noah. Noah was a grandchild of Abraham. All these people, it's a bloodline. They even tell you in the Bible, they say it is about a bloodline, Abraham's bloodline. And it will go from father to son, father to son. That's a kingship. That's a monarchy. Whether you call it a monarchy and you call them kings or not, it's still, that's what a monarchy is. That's what a kingship is. That's when you have the son take over and then the son of that, father to son, father to son. That's literally a kingship. You're using a bloodline to determine who's leader of your community or society or country. That's a kingship. Yeah. And a king is a dictator, okay? And not only that, he's not even like a dictator that earned his spot by being, forceful and taking over. No. I have more respect for a dictator like that than a dictator who gets his dictatorship through a bloodline, because those people have been told from birth that they are everything and they are great, and anyone that doesn't have their royal bloodline is a piece of garbage. And they're entitled, because from birth they've been told, hey, you deserve to be the king, man. You deserve to be the leader of the country, just because of your bloodline. That's what's going on here, and you're believing them in this story. This is insane. It makes no sense. You're believing a dictator about a crazy story that you admit you would never do. You would never say. You would never ask God for something. Can you win this war for me, and I'll do some human sacrifice. Right. And another thing I wanted to you to understand, okay, if human sacrifice, like if this happened today, right, and you did this to there was a war, and you said to God, whatever comes out and greets me, I'm going to sacrifice it for you if you let me win this war, right? Now, if you didn't believe in human sacrifice and it wasn't so common and prevalent, right, what would happen when the girl came out, when the daughter came out of the house, right, to greet the dad? If they were strongly against, and it wasn't human sacrifice, and it wasn't so prevalent, and everyone, it was just, if it wasn't so commonplace, what would have happened, right? Let's say this happened today, modern times, with you, and the daughter came out to greet you. What would you do? What I would do, because I'm against human sacrifice, and my Pastafarian God is against human sacrifice, my daughter would come out, and I'd grab her by the arm, and I'd be like, daughter, here, I won the war. Come here, sit with me, so that we can wait for an animal to come out and greet me, because we're against human sacrifice. So obviously, when I said whoever comes out to greet me, I wasn't talking about humans. God knew I wasn't talking about humans. I'm not going to human sacrifice you. We're dead set against that. Obviously, I'm going to pull you aside. We're going to sit here. We're going to wait for the dog to come out and greet me, the goat to come out and greet me, the chicken to come out and greet me. But that didn't happen, did it? No. The daughter didn't say, oh, well, we're against human sacrifice. What did she say? She said, we have to do what you promised, because that is the right thing to do. And she would never, ever say that if it wasn't moral to human sacrifice someone. If your father came home and said, I got to human sacrifice you because I made a promise to God, what's the first thing that come out of your mouth? It's the first thing coming out of my mouth. I thought we don't believe in human sacrifice. Why you do it? What are you talking about? All right, let's see what the Christians have to say. This is called Got Questions Ministries on YouTube. If you want to watch the whole thing.
After the battle, his daughter came to greet him. Jephthah was devastated and stated that he had made a vow to the Lord that he could not break. Jephthah's daughter asked for a 2-month reprieve, and Jephthah granted her request. The passage then states that Jephthah did to her as he had vowed. The Bible does not explicitly state that Jephthah sacrificed his daughter as a burnt offering.
Yes, it does. He's lying. We just read it. He said, I vow to give you a burnt offering of whoever comes out to the first one to come out of my house after I come home from winning the war. She came out and he said, oh, I got to do what I said I was going to do. And what did he vow to do? To offer her up as a burnt offering. Burnt offering can only be one thing, okay? How do I know this? Because the Bible says burnt offering about 1 billion times in the Bible, and every single time they're talking about burning an animal as a sacrifice. But not all of a sudden, this one time, no, it doesn't mean burnt offering means something else.
Since his daughter was mourning the fact that she would never marry, instead of mourning that she was about to die, this possibly indicates...
Okay, those mean the same thing, okay? Mourning that your virginity, meaning mourning that you're not going to have a family, you're not going to have kids, you're not going to have this life. That is mourning. He's lying. He's saying that she went up and she wasn't mourning her life. She was only mourning the fact that her virginity. Bull, that's the same thing. That's like if I had 2 babies and I go up in the hills and I know I'm going to be killed in 2 months and I got to come back in 2 months. What am I going to mourn? I'm going to mourn my life by regretting that my kids are going to grow up. But if I go into the hills and so that I can regret my kids are going to grow up with no dad, that doesn't mean I'm not. That is literally how you mourn. That's how I would mourn my life. And she's mourning her life by mourning what is she losing? Her future babies. That's what she's missing. This is insane. This doesn't make sense. She wasn't mourning her life? Yes, she was mourning her life, you idiot.
This possibly indicates that Jephthah gave her to the tabernacle as a servant instead of sacrificing her.
That makes no sense. That's how you mourn your life. You think about things you could have had, what you would have had, what you're going to miss out on. That's literally mourning your life. And he's like, oh, she wasn't mourning her life. Yes, she was. That's how you mourn your life. If you were going to die tomorrow, you knew you were going to die tomorrow, what would you be thinking about? Would you be thinking about, yeah, of course you're going to be thinking about yourself, but you're also going to be thinking about your children, your wife, your husband, your mother, dad, and if you mourn those people, then you're not mourning your death, really. They're all exclusive. You can only mourn one or the other. You can't mourn both, huh? That makes all sense.
However, again, Judges 11:39 does seem to indicate that he did follow through with the sacrifice. He did to her as he had vowed.
Yeah.
Whatever the case,
he only made one vow, okay, to do a burnt offering from who came out. And then he got sad when his daughter came out, and he said, "Oh, I got to do what I said I vowed to do." This is 11 sentence story. You cannot interpretate it any other way.
God had specifically forbidden offering human sacrifices, so it was absolutely not God's desire for Jephthah to sacrifice his daughter.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Would you today, knowing that human sacrifices are against, God don't like it, would you make a deal with God saying, hey, can you make me win this war and I'll sacrifice anyone who comes out of my house, which is most likely going to be my daughter, right? Because who else would come out? You know what I mean? Other than maybe a dog. What is it? Has he got a barn in his house? Or he's got cows and chickens all over the place inside the house going to come out, and they're going to come out and greet him. Because that's what happens. Cows always come up to greet people. Yeah, right. And chickens. They see a human being. They're like, oh, I got to go greet that guy. No, the only one that was going to greet him was maybe a dog and a human. Okay? It makes no sense. You would not do that.